This is LS, and you're on Thorin's YouTube channel, so cut the Western shit.
The group stage phase of the League of Legends World Championship for Season 8 is behind us. Sure, there were certainly thrills, there were some fantastic games, there were some very poor games as well. Some of the groups were really exciting, some of them played out as expected. But now that the group stage phase is behind us, I thought this is a perfect time to discuss improving the format of the group stage of the World Championship. Because as someone who considers himself a connoisseur of many esports, of esports history in terms of the big Western esports games, the format currently used in the group stage phase of the League of Legends World Championship is quite frankly a very weak format. It's one of the worst ones out there, actually. The majority of other big esports games, even ones that had an initial foundational base in round robin, so I'm thinking of things like, for example, at certain points in time, certain StarCraft Brood War tournaments, CS 1.6 actually used to do this for the IM circuit. In fact, more recently in CSGO, even as recently as last year, we were using round robin for certain tournaments, IMs most notably. Most have moved on. Most have acknowledged it's not that great a format. And generally, there are other areas where when you look aspect by aspect of the group stage phase, you'll find out most of the choices made are either what I would consider suboptimal to get the best games, to get the best teams, or just not actually particularly good in terms of what they then imply for the rest of the tournament. So, especially in the context of League of Legends having less big tournaments than other games. It doesn't have a big open circuit like like CSGO, like Dota 2. It also, as a result of not having a bigger international/global circuit, there's less inter-regional play, where EU plays NA and Korea plays NA and EU plays China. And as a result, unlike in Dota and CSGO, you don't get the elite teams playing each other every 2 months, and therefore a real sense of who's the best. And so much as a result rides upon these group stage best of ones that we get in the World Championship. And so many harsh judgments are going to be written as a result of them, positively or negatively. And people's entire careers can be defined by that one time they make it to Worlds and what happens in 2 or 3 best of ones out of an entire career. So do we want the most competitive tournament or do we want the most exciting tournament? Now, I didn't ask that as if it's the only choice. The point is the general direction, you've got to choose one. Because when you make these decisions on your format, you're going to have to essentially lean towards the direction of one of those options or emphasize that more. Now, obviously, you ideally want some combination of the two. You want it to still be very exciting, have a lot of fan interest, have people from all around the world interested in watching, but you also want it to be a very competitive tournament to produce some fantastic games and be incredibly memorable and have a truly worthy champion where it's almost indisputable that they were the best team or they played the best or whatever you want it to be in that sense. So let's start off with the factor of using 4 team groups. So groups that each have 4 teams in them. One of my problems with this is when you then make it best of 1 within these groups and then double round robin only, quite frankly, I don't think there's enough play here. Basically, you play 6 games and that's it, unless you go through to the playoffs. So that's not that great, quite frankly, in terms of excitement for the 2 teams who go out of the group stage. You just get to play against 3 different opponents. You end up playing 6 best of 1s and then you go out of the tournament. That's it. Then you have to add in that you always get unfair groups due to the regional separation, where 2 NA teams can't be in the same group, 2 Korean teams can't be in the same group. So as a result, you're not getting a lot of play and you're getting some really mixed up groups. Now, I think a great solution to this would be, since you don't want to reduce the number of teams at Worlds, I would agree with that generally, take the 16 teams and instead of having 4 4-team groups where you're isolated and you only play 3 opponents if you indeed go out in the group stage, take all those teams and make 2 8-team groups and you play 7 opponents within your group. Now, even if you kept with best of 1 double round robin, which I wouldn't necessarily suggest, I think that's still a better format because now there's less of an issue of who's in what group, that you're not going to have as much of a consideration. You can get rid of the whole regional separation thing. You can seed much better. You're going to get a lot of play. You're going to get to play teams from NA and Korea and from EU, whatever region you're from, you're going to get to play a number of them and probably some people from your region as well. It's going to be a really nice display of what you like against the world's field. You're going to get a great sense. I mean, this is actually something that was employed somewhat similarly in the International for 2013, the International 3, which had a similar format as this. And I thought it was a great format. Actually, it looked really, really good. Then you've got to look at the fact of having best of one double round robin. Now, best of one upsets already don't feel very satisfying. Like, they're real games, they count, you still have to be good to beat someone who's better than you, but it's much more likely you can upset a best of one than best of three. Then you've got to add in the whole red side, blue side equation, which at this world's okay, they let you play one game on each side, but there are times in League of Legends where one side is just favoured more, where one side just helps you in the draft more. Then you've got to add in terms of best of ones and double round robin. We build up these narratives the whole year long. We want to see the culmination of all these top teams from around the world who've earned their spots at Worlds. I love the qualification system for Worlds, by the way. I think it's amazing. Then come to Worlds and battle it out. But we don't really get to see that many actual games. And sure, they're spread over enough days, the tournament might feel like it lasts a long time, but we don't really see all that much play generally, especially when you consider, I understand that the teams who come like 15th to 16th place, it's one thing if there's a format where they only play like 3 or 4 games and that's it, you know, but like the teams that come 9th place only get to play 6 individual games at Worlds for being 9th place at the World Championship. That feels a bit rough to me. Then you've got to add in, as I said, it means so much for people's careers and their legacies. And also, another detail, whenever people say, but best of ones are more exciting, like I love the thrill of an upset or the chance that like the best Western team could upset the best Korean team no matter how far they actually are apart in terms of like objective level. Well, here's the part you never stop and think about. It's the point I always make to people about why I personally don't like upsets. It's not about the upset itself. I'm fine with an underdog getting a win, doing something amazing, pulling off a cheese, being creative, being decisive in a game he shouldn't be able to win like Vitality was in their group against Gen G and Royal Never Give Up. But one thing I hate about best of one upsets is because it's so much more likely you'll get an upset in a best of one, and there's so much less way to mitigate against it. It fucks up playoff brackets because obviously we determine playoff brackets based on where you place within the group. Well, obviously, whatever you think about general seeding, the results of a bunch of best of ones in a round robin group of 4 teams doesn't really tell you very well who was the best in terms of order, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And yet we're using the 1 and 2 to determine who you play in the playoffs. So then you end up with brackets that are just an absolute mess. Well, what you gained from the excitement and the potential of the upset, you now lost in terms of great playoff matches or teams that are really great meeting way too early in the playoffs and not meeting in the grand final and having that be truly hyped. And so you give up something somewhere in exchange for the upsets. Then, once you move beyond the idea of best of one, because I would go ahead and say immediately, best of 2, best of 3. Like, best of 2 is actually a good format in League of Legends, even though I agree it's not very, like, aesthetically pleasing. I mean, you can have a draw. It's also just not that great for the narrative. Like, it was a draw. Your brain wants there to be a winner. I acknowledge that. But the reason why in League of Legends is actually a very good format is because it then mitigates side imbalance. Now, I know they're doing round robin here, but I actually also think in best of 2, you could do something like if you win the best of 2, you get extra points. If you go 1-1, you get like half the points, whatever it might be in that setting, and make some kind of like a special, maybe you have 3 points if you win the best of 2, whatever it would be. Best of 3, I think, personally, is good because it's the World Championship. Like, we've got time to run a tournament here. We've got time to play out the games a bit more. So let's give it kind of a playoff feel even in the group stage. Now, it's not going to be the real playoff feel because of the fact that the playoffs are the round of 8 and that's a top 8 finish and you've got a chance to go deep and win prize money and do something epic. Those will still always be more important, but we can get some real play out in the group stage. We don't have to have like a stop and start like, I had a bad start to this game. You can come back in the series. So then you got to add in, if you're a person who's a fan of upsets, well, upsets are going to feel way more epic if the team wins a best of 3 against a top Asian team or over their rival from Europe or North America, whichever way around it is. It's, as a result, first of all, it's going to be less of an issue about players being like new to the scene and pressure. They're going to get a lot of play. They're going to get a chance to come back in the series. Then you got to add in League of Legends, it's already hard enough to offset people's inexperience because people aren't blooded on the international level. You only get to Worlds if you're already a top team in your region, but you haven't had a chance to get your experience level up playing those big tournaments like you would in CSGO, like you would in Dota, the open circuit games. Afrika Freaks is an obvious example of that. Amazing team back in Korea. Very, very strong team and amazing in best of 5s, by the way. But you put them in this format and best of 1s and against teams they don't play and that quite frankly are in theory all worse, and they looked wonky as fuck to start out with. Yeah, they recovered, but they were on bad footing initially, and one more best of 1 would have put them in serious position to not get out of the group. So if you want epic upsets, put them in best of three, because you know what? I don't complain about best of three wins from underdogs. Like, I might say, yeah, the better team didn't win this, or you know what? There's a little bit of fortune here. But unlike a best of one, I find it a lot easier to just accept the result and say, right, yeah, you got it, mate. Worthy winner. Who can complain about losing the best of three, right? Then you've got to look at the pool draw system. I've gone over this many times before. I've probably even done a video on it. I'll try and link that here if I have. I think this is one of the worst features of Worlds, because it doesn't exist like this in most other games. Because on the one hand, what you're saying is, I'm going to introduce a form of seeding, but even within that seeding, within each of the pools, I'm randomizing it. And what that randomizing means is, I'm going to treat, at Season 8 Worlds, Flash Wolves, number one seed from the LMS, as being equal, literally equal and identical in value to KT Rolster, number one seed from Korea, or RNG, Royal Never Give Up, number one seed from China. Now, I don't know any expert who would have had Flash Wolves as equal in strength to those teams, and yet we're going to start making groups where you have a number one seed, and that can be Flash Wolves or it can be KT. And you can already see how you're setting the table. This is a recipe for disaster, to have really bad groups on occasion, if not nearly every Worlds has one that's kind of a bit weak and then one that's way too strong in comparison. Likewise, go down the pools, it's the same principle again. So the worst one ever, in my opinion, is Pool 2. Like, I can't believe that they still have Pool 2 and it's this many teams, like 8 teams in there. If you're going to do a pool system and you're going to make it randomized even like this, have like 4 or 5 or 6 different pools so that you can at least stratify them. Because the idea that just as you're going to treat Flash Wolves as equal to RNG, you're going to treat Mad Team and Fengvu Buffalo as of equal and identical value in the tournament to Invictus Gaming, incredibly strong Chinese team. A freak of freaks, a team that played in the final of LCK in the spring and was one of the better teams over the year from the hardest region in the world. Then you go down to Pool 3, the pool that has the teams coming from the play-ins. So Cloud9 is now equal to G-Rex from the LMS, is it? Is that reasonable? Is that a fair? Now, this one might be more contentious, because at this point in time, that's not as big a deal as in the past when you were comparing, whatever, a Pain Gaming, someone on that level, to potentially an Orion, some team that actually had a lot of potential. But you can see the pool system already sets you up for failure with some bad groups, with some uneven groups, with some unfair groups. Now let's look at another possible format, rather than best of ones, round robin, all these different ones we talked about. Well, there's a couple that come to mind. I'll give you one, and this is actually going to go the other approach from what I would suggest. If you want to go the approach of having an even more exciting tournament, but you want to get rid of playing so few opponents, and you want to get rid of the interregional element, here's what you do. You bring in Swiss system. Now, the good thing about Swiss system, sure, it needs to be seeded well to do it well, which is going to be hard in League of Legends, I admit, because you don't play many international tournaments. It's a lot harder to seed than CSGO or Dota 2, and you don't have the same circuit point system for the year, because not everyone plays the same tournaments. But even without the seeding, if you just want excitement, Swiss system will deliver. It brings crazy heat in terms of upsets, in terms of matchups. Anyone can play anyone in the tournament. So you could have a scenario where Royal Never Give Up and KT win each of their games, the first game, and they get drawn against each other in the 1-0 section. And suddenly they're playing each other. Then you could have teams that lose. Cloud9, Team Liquid, let's say, lose their first game each. Now it's all of a sudden they're playing each other in the 0-1 group. Then you have all over the place the hype of the draw. Now, I'm not a big fan of unseeded Swiss system. I think Swiss system has a lot of flaws with it. But again, if you want to go for pure excitement, I think it's better than best of one round robin with 14 groups. Now, what I would suggest is what I personally have come to love the most in esports history. I love it the most in CSGO, and that is GSL, or as it used to be called, Duel Tournament in StarCraft, Korean StarCraft. It's basically where you have a little double elimination bracket inside of a group. So one of the good things about this format is, first of all, you have one less series than round robin. You don't basically have a throwaway game where it's possible for the team that's definitely getting out of the group to play the team that definitely can't come out of the group. That can never happen. So there are no tiebreakers possible. The top two teams go through, the one who wins the winner bracket part, the one who wins the decider, the one who loses the losers match goes out, and the one who loses the decider goes out. It's very simple. It's very easy to track where you are at all points in times, and there are no tiebreakers, so you don't need any additional games to be played. You don't need additional studio time. There's also, because of the fact that you don't have throwaway games that are meaningless for anyone, there is a way lower chance of throwing games and manipulation. Like at this particular tournament, okay, when some of the teams got upset, it didn't end up happening, but you could see a world, it's happened in esports in the past, where another top team would go, fuck being the number 1 seed in my group. If the best team in the tournament's number 2 seed and I can potentially get drawn against them in the round of 8, fuck it, I'll just come second as well. I'll throw this one game. I'm much better than the rest of the teams in my group. I'll come second in the group, and therefore, worst case scenario, I can only meet the number 1 favourite for the tournament, maybe my mortal enemy in the semi-finals. You don't get that with GSL. It's just never been the way it's been played out. Then you got to look at regional separation. I brought this up before, right? The logic here is that we want to show inter-regional play when we get to Worlds. We don't want Cloud9 and Team Liquid to both go to Worlds, get in the same group, play each other, and then go out of the tournament and they've only played 2 other teams from other regions and you didn't get a proper international global feel. Well, first of all, that leads, having that sort of a format where you have to dodge opponents, to groups combined with the pool system, like TSM's group in Season 4, where they had no Korean team, no top Chinese seed, and yet they get to now brag about finishing top 8 at Worlds as a result of that whack-ass easy group. Now, the solution for this, first and foremost, like I said before, is make bigger group sizes, more teams in your group. Then it doesn't matter if you have intra-regional play, because you're going to get a lot of inter-regional play anyway, and that's no longer going to be a problem, and you're not going to get whack groups where people get bounced, and you get a group like TSM got in Season 4. You're at least always going to get a Chinese team, a Korean team in your group, and you can't dodge them and get an easy group in that sense. You could still get an easier group, but not an outright easy group, because the difference between having a Korean team and having no Korean team is fucking massive when it comes to the World Championships. One of the reasons why people bragging about where their team placed in terms of the bracket never meant as much to me unless I go back and I look at your group and I saw you had really hard teams in there. If you had one of the easier ones, miss me with all that fucking bragging and shit, as though you would have made it out of the group that TSM 2016 was in Group D with Royal Never Give Up and Samsung Galaxy. Get the fuck out of my face. Now, if you use proper seeding, you could easily avoid a lot of the regional separation issues, because actually, now admittedly, this wouldn't hold for all of history and it might not hold for other esports games, but as it stands right now, you wouldn't have as much of a problem anyway. Because if you did real seeding the way that like Deficio or Jat or some expert would do it, well, pretty much all the Korean teams would be cited as elite level teams, tier 1 teams. They'd all be in pool 1, and so they'd never all be in the same group anyway. Then you'd have like, let's say like the LMS teams or the NALCS are considered the worst of the major regions. Well then, because they're considered the worst, they're also not all going to be in the same group. They're going to be spread about as they were. In fact, they're going to be fed to the Korean teams. If all the teams are at a similar level, even if one of them does get in a similar group, let them fucking compete. They're at the same level. The seeding's telling you that they actually should play against each other potentially. Now, quite frankly, if anyone says, but seeding like that's unfair, or that's got bias involved, right? But Riot already uses seeding because they have the pool system and they say who's in pool 1, who's in pool 2, and who's in pool 3. And even if they just say LMS number 1 seed gets to be in pool 1, they are already saying, inherent with how the pool system works, that number 1 seed LMS for this tournament will be treated as better than number 2 and number 3 seed for LCK from Korea. So they've already done that. They've just done bad seeding, quite frankly. So don't tell me they don't interject bias or expert opinion, because they've done it already. It's just very poor expert opinion, and it's like bias that, quite frankly, I think ruins the tournament. Or use regional seeding to help you. Make that work. Another factor, make more pools. That way, domestic rivalries will be a lot more cutthroat and epic if you meet each other and potentially eliminate each other from Worlds, or boost the other guy to the next portion of Worlds. I think that would be pretty cool in itself. So there are a number of factors. You notice almost every element of the group stage phase is suboptimal or flawed, at least from my perspective, and what I would like for a better tournament. So here are some of the ideas for how you could actually fix it. This video was kindly supported by Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, NateDOhDoubleG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, VeXii, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out, as always, to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you fancy a few teasers for what's coming up in my content? How about taking part in an esports discussion with me? Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.